In your book, what has been the global temperature change in the last century? Say that again, please. 0.9. Okay. It says 0.9 Fahrenheit, 0.5 Celsius. It's actually almost double that now. 0.9. This is a typo in your book. Please change your answer on 25. And will you tell Anna when she gets back? 0.9 Celsius gain in the last century, 1.8 Fahrenheit gain in the last century. You may remember that study that came out last Thursday in the journal Science said that in the last century we've gone from the lowest temperature in 11,000 years to the highest temperature in 11,000 years over a period of under 100 years. Yeah.
Does that mean that we're heading into another ice?
Yes. Yeah, we have been in a cooling trend. All the Milankovitch stuff, remember how we talked about the overlapping of cycles? All the Milankovitch stuff that we should have been heading for an ice age, now we went and picked up out of there. Okay, so everybody got those numbers? Question mark? Everyone got those numbers? Yeah. Cool.
I got something else to show you. Can anybody give me a time update? How much do I have?
7 minutes.
Perfect. I will be able to finish this.
The guy who started Microsoft was named Bill Gates. And in case you hadn't heard, Bill Gates retired from Microsoft, and he took his multi-billion dollars, and he and his wife have been making every effort to give away all their wealth before they die. It's called the Gates Foundation. And one of the things that Gates started to look at was climate change, because even a college dropout knows it's a big deal. So he came up with this thing called the Gates equation. He said, how do we solve this carbon problem? I think most of you speak math enough that you probably know what I'm getting at here, but I'll try to point this out. Bill Gates said CO2 is the result of the number of people, by what they do, by how much energy it costs, by how much CO2 comes from their energy. And you don't need necessarily to quote Bill Gates, but he did this to make a point. He says, look, this number, P, that's going to be really hard to change. He made a joke that was actually really funny. He said, if I used all my money to pay people not to have babies, I could only offer them 70 cents each. Obviously, that's not going to work. I don't know if that's right, by the way. But sort of funny. Yeah, I actually found this pretty funny. And the services per person, it's hard to tell people that they're not allowed to have an increasing quality of life. It makes a lot of sense for the planet to eat less red meat, but that doesn't mean I get to walk up to some hungry kid in India and take away his cheeseburger and be like, sorry, bro, we got to save the planet. Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry, that was a bad example, but you hear. You know, it's difficult to reverse development. People have a right to pursue their dreams, I think. Geopolitically, it's not very popular to lower S, the services per person. He said, energy per service, we can probably do that. There's a lot of engineers working on that. And finally, CO2 per unit energy, we already have that. And so during Bill Gates' TED Talk about this, he referred to a Stanford University study. Wait, Princeton, excuse me. I always mix those two up. Which one is which?
Princeton and Southwest.
Where's
Princeton and New Jersey?
New Jersey, okay. So some guys from Princeton, forgive me, excuse me. The guys from Princeton said, if we stayed consistent at the year 2000 CO2 concentration, we get a little bit of climate change, but if our rate stays at the year 2000 of CO2 gain, we'd get the red line. You guys remember seeing this graph? Yeah. We talked about this, right? A couple times? Okay. They said there's no silver bullet. There's no way to lower CO2. There's no single thing. It doesn't exist. Instead of chasing this make-believe solution that's supposed to fix the problem. The guys from Princeton argued for this concept, and you don't need the details, but you should know the name. It's called the 15 wedges. And you can see them. They are alternating dark green, light green. Their idea was, instead of looking for the one silver bullet that will solve the problem, we should just charge with everything we've got, and together that will solve the problem. They're called wedges. And this concept, that word, to call it a wedge, you guys know what I mean by a wedge, right? Like that shape, like the thing you use, like a doorstop wedge. So they said we could eat away at that temperature gain with a bunch of existing solutions. If you're curious, I'll rattle off the wedges, but I don't think you have to memorize these because the exact wedges keep changing. They said more efficient vehicles, less vehicle use, more efficient buildings, better coal power plants, burning gas instead of coal for new power plants, capturing CO2, replacing coal with nuclear, replacing coal with wind, replacing coal with solar. Anyway, there's this big list. And the concept is, rather than looking for the one CO2 bullet, the one silver bullet that's going to fix the whole problem, the idea of wedges is we should lower CO2 in all these little pieces. This is probably the best way to mitigate global warming, is not to find the one answer that doesn't exist, but instead to use all these answers that we can just start doing more now. His bottom line was, I hate to say this, but we don't need more science. Bill Gates said this is no longer a scientific question because we've saved the world from climate change if we just have the political action. I found that to be a really compelling speech. You can probably find it. I think it was a TED Talk. If it wasn't a TED Talk, it's famous, so I'm sure you'll find it. In our last couple minutes, I've got some kooky stuff for you to chew on. This may not be noteworthy because it's probably too kooky. But would you guys like to hear some kooky ideas for lowering global climate change? Sure. This is just personal enrichment. You can chuckle and laugh. One option, we should shred all the waste iron on Earth and dump it in the ocean. Because iron is the biggest limiting factor for algae. So we can make more algae in the world's oceans to soak up the CO2. And then, side benefit, with more productivity, we could grow the oceanic food web to recover our fisheries. Number two, this one's for you, Ryan. Oh boy. We could shoot all of our garbage into space to make clouds of sunblock so that we don't get that much light and thus generate that much heat. And of course, rockets are really expensive and ineffective, but if we had a space elevator, you be quiet over there. Yes, right. And by the way, that space crash still has gravity, so we'll all fall back on the spectrum. Number three, we are doing around the world. What if we pay third world countries not to log their forest? For a country like Borneo, for an island like Borneo, they're going to get like $100 million by logging all their rainforests. But the rest of the world can afford to give them $100 million to protect their forest because of the climate benefits of their forest. It's called third world forest commodification, to make it a commodity, paying the third world to keep their forest. Number four, you've heard this one already. Anybody remember the cheapest way to lower population? Birth control. Yeah, cheap birth control. Condoms are the cheapest way to lower climate change globally. Because if people who seek birth control get more access to birth control, population growth rate goes down, and that is the cheapest way to lower the P in the Gates equation. That one. Say what? Oh, abstinence. Yeah, of course. That is probably cheap. And the last kooky idea, you'd be shocked about this. If you took every roof in the 100 largest cities you could offset one full year's worth of greenhouse gas growth by making the roofs more reflective, making them white instead of black. Anyway, goodbye children, we finished 9.3 today. Tomorrow we're going to have